Good evening, and welcome to The Advocates, the PBS Fight of the Week, coming to you from Boston's historic Faneuil Hall. The issue of tonight's debate is a concern of every working American, our Social Security system, and specifically the question, should Social Security benefits be financed in part from general tax revenues? Arguing in support of our proposal is Advocate Gus Tyler, Assistant President of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. Appearing as witnesses for Mr. Tyler will be New Jersey Senator Harrison Williams and Nelson Cruikshank, President of the National Council of Senior Citizens. Arguing against the proposal is William Rusher, publisher of the National Review magazine. Appearing as witnesses for Mr. Rusher will be Robert Myers, former Chief Actuary for the Social Security Administration, and Senator Jack Miller, former member of the Senate Finance Committee.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Moderator Michael Dukakis has just called tonight's meeting to order.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Advocates here in Boston's historic Faneuil Hall. I regret to report that Senator Edmund Muskie, who is going to be our guest moderator this evening, is unable to be with us as a result of a conflict in dates between the taping of this program and the funeral of the late President Lyndon Johnson. We do look forward, however, to having Senator Muskie with us on another Advocates broadcast in the not-too-distant future. Few issues directly affect as many Americans as our Social Security system, whether as Social Security taxpayers during their working years or as recipients of Social Security benefits after retirement. Our question tonight concerns the financing of those Social Security benefits. And specifically, we ask, should Social Security benefits be financed in part out of general tax funds? Advocate Gus Tyler says yes.
The Social Security system should be supported by general revenues as well as by the present tax on wages and salaries, both to make the system more adequate in benefits and to make it more equitable in the financing.
Advocate William Rusher says no.
Tonight's proposal is simply another gigantic raid by the forces of big labor on the present and future incomes of every American who works for a living. It won't be called that, of course, but keep your eye on the ball. The target for tonight is you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back to you in a moment for your cases, but first, a word of background. If you are one of the 96 million Americans who works for a living and have examined your paycheck since the beginning of the year, you've probably noticed the higher deduction for Social Security. Social Security was one of the major achievements of federal legislation during the 1930s. The system was designed to provide a guaranteed retirement income to America's wage earners when they reach 65. Today, the Social Security system provides benefits to nearly 1 in every 7 Americans, retired and disabled, and their survivors. Their benefits are paid for by the 96 million wage earners in the country, all of whom earn the right to similar benefits upon their own retirement. Since the beginning, the program has been self-supporting. A specific deduction from paychecks, that is, a payroll tax, has paid for every Social Security benefit. As both the number of people receiving benefits and the size of those benefits have increased, the payroll taxes to pay for them have also increased. Here's how. Beginning in 1950, a maximum of $45 per year was taken from all workers' wages. In 1960, the maximum went to $144, and in 1973, workers will pay a maximum of $632 due to the broad increase in benefits enacted by the Congress in 1972. And there are more increases scheduled for the years ahead. Not everyone pays the maximum. The payroll tax is taken as a fixed percent of wages up to a wage ceiling. If you make $5,400 a year, you will contribute $315 this year to Social Security. If you make twice that, $10,800, your contribution will be $632. But that is the maximum. Persons earning over $10,800 a year pay only the maximum $632 contribution. Whatever an individual contributes, his employer pays a matching amount into the Social Security Trust Fund. Thus, these funds are comprised equally of employee and employer contributions. Out of them, benefits are then paid to the retired, disabled, or survivors. And now to the cases. Mr. Tyler, why should Social Security benefits be financed in part out of general tax revenues?
We believe that Social Security is a blessing to all America, and therefore the whole nation should assume some of the costs. Without Social Security, millions of retirees, widows, children, and disabled would be a public burden. The billions that flow from the Social Security treasuries create more jobs and more profits for our total economy. Now, where does the money come from for Social Security at the present time? Almost exclusively from the low and middle income worker. Virtually no contribution comes from those who live on unearned income, such as interest, capital gains, or inheritance. Now, as the costs as well as the benefits have risen over the years, the tax burden on the working man has become increasingly oppressive. Interestingly enough, the creators of the Social Security system forecast a time when it would be necessary to use general funds to supplement the payroll tax. They thought it would be about 1965. That hour has come. Maybe we're late. We believe that Social Security benefits must be expanded and that tax relief must be given to low and middle income workers. And to do this, the system needs and deserves the participation of the entire society through general revenues based on ability to pay. My first witness for this evening is Senator Harrison Williams.
Welcome to the Advocates, Senator Williams. Nice to have you with us.
Glad to be, honored to be on the Advocates, and glad to be in Massachusetts, Democratic Massachusetts.
Senator Williams, you are, I believe, the chairman of the Labor and Public Welfare Committee of the Senate, and you have served on the special committee, or do serve on the special committee on the aging. Therefore, you have been an opportunity to listen to much evidence over the years. Would you say that the Social Security system at the present time, good as it is adequate?
I say it is not adequate, recognizing, of course, that it has been greatly improved within the last few years. Coverage of, for those who are disabled was a major step forward, the Medicare provisions, and most recently an increase of 20%. But we still have millions who are Social Security beneficiaries who are living at incomes below the poverty level. This should not be. We still see areas that I think should be covered that are not, particularly in the medical field. There's a deductible of $72 on every hospital bill for Social Security beneficiaries. They have to pay that first. Also, I'd like to see doctor-prescribed drugs covered. And I'd also like to see that special tax, that extra tax, to be covered for doctors' bills removed too.
In the light of these deficiencies, there are some who say that the people on Social Security could make up the difference through private pension plans or through savings or through some other device. What is the hope?
There's little hope at all that there will be a private pension plan system general enough to make up the difference. First of all, far more people are not in private pension plans than are in pension plans. And number two, those who are in plans generally are not going to receive a meaningful benefit at age 65. This, I say, is a matter of fact after 2 years of study in depth. And that's why we're on the threshold of doing something about that, because right now there is no national law to bring private pension plans up to the expectations.
So we have to count on the Social Security system, and you want to have some improvements in that system.
Exactly.
How would you fund these improvements? Because that's going to cost money.
My proposition is, as you've stated it in your opening, that we should look to a third partner in financing Social Security. We have the employee, the employer. We should have the people generally through general revenues that are raised with the fairest tax that we know of, a progressive income tax where people pay according to their ability. And not only through general revenues and the taxes do I look, but I look to the hope and the opportunity of reductions of certain expenditures we have today. Notwithstanding Mr. Ehrlichman speaking for the administration, I think there should be a peace dividend as we come out of this war, and we should see substantial reductions. not only in cutting out waste, but living in peace.
Let me ask you this question. In terms of priorities, I know that you're not the entire Congress of the United States, but as you see it, and you've been in on this thing, what would your priorities be as you got this money? How would you apply it? For tax relief, for expanding? What kind of an agenda do you have roughly in mind?
It's going to have to be a brief agenda, Senator.
Well, first of all, I mentioned that it's an equal tax. Everybody pays the same rate. I would first bring relief to the low-wage earner who pays a very high proportionate part, number one, and then move on to the benefits that are paid to the minimum beneficiaries who are way down at $100 a month, and then go on to supplementing some of the medical hospital benefits.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
Senator, let's turn to Mr. Rusher, who has some searching questions coming up for you.
Senator,
Mr. Rusher.
why stop at a third of the revenues of the cost of Social Security being paid for through general revenues? Why not a half?
Well,
Would you
first
oppose
of all seasoned opinion that's been working on this great system of Social Security since its inception in this country in 1935 have seen in this then new social compact a partnership of the three elements of the employee to be covered, his employer, who is he is producing for, and because it is a national benefit, it strengthens the nation. The nation through its federal government should be the third part of this this most noble, enlightened system.
I can see why it might be the third partner, but I don't see why it should necessarily. What's the magic of the third part, even with regard to people who are paying out of their salaries, their wages now, withholding? In the case of low-income workers, you're already proposing to reduce the amount that's withheld, so you're not talking about equal parts in any case. What's the magic of a third?
Well, first of all, look at it from the employee's standpoint, right from the beginning. He wanted not to be destitute and living on welfare. He wanted to be part of a program that he was contributing to. Workers want to be contributors because they want to know that they have the benefits provided as a matter of right.
That explains why not 100%.
They are one part. The employer is in an equal position to the employee. If we bring in the third necessary part, there are three, and we make the three-legged stool of the employee, the employer, and the people through general revenues.
Although in the case of low-income employees, their particular leg of the stool is going to be much shorter, according to Mr. Tyler, as I understand. Is that right?
I don't...
Those under 5,000, earning 5,000 or less, will be actually paying less if they, in terms of withholding.
Well, as a practical matter, if this should come about and general revenues were used, probably they would it would keep them where they are, but they would not have any increases as we escalate with the increase of cost of living. We now have an escalator in the Social Security program.
If the government wants to make payments to certain persons based on need, as in the case of the low-income worker, why can't this be done directly out of its general resources under the welfare program? Why does it have to be run through Social Security and transform the entire philosophy and basis of Social Security?
People like to live in dignity.
Exactly.
The Social Security program is a program that recognizes this. These needs that I speak of should be paid under a program that honors the dignity of an individual and doesn't force him or her to come in almost begging for that supplementary assistance.
The dignity of the Social Security program has been precisely that it has not been based on need, but upon a contribution by the employer and his employee. Now, why should it be suddenly dignified for them to take welfare merely because you've run it through Social Security?
Where we have supplemented with general revenues, it hasn't detracted from the dignity of the Social Security program at all. And there are general revenue contributions to certain aspects of Social Security
I have
today.
to ask you, where is the money coming from? And it will be $30 billion a year, I believe it's been calculated by the end of this decade, even on a modest estimate. Where is all this coming from? That peace dividend you were talking about?
Well, I know we're going back to Congress and going to be asked to put up a supplemental $2 billion for this, to pay for the war. This war has cost over $100 billion. We're out of this war now. That's one of the places that I look to for some part.
And another
and
is
without raising taxes.
And you propose to do this without raising the income taxes of anybody in the United States?
No, I didn't say that.
Now, what did you are going to raise taxes.
I said I would look here
for a part.
to this dividend that we can get through better administration
and lastly,
and through a peace dividend. And if we go to general revenues for more money, it'll come through the fairest tax and not the tax that soaks the poorest people as much as it soaks the richest people.
Mr. Rush, you're going to have an opportunity to get another couple of questions in on Senator Williams, I hope. But let's go back to Mr. Tyler for one additional question.
Yes, there was one statement that you made, Senator Williams, that interested me. You said at the present time, certain aspects of the Social Security program are paid for out of general revenues.
Part of the medical coverage is paid for out of general revenues. Half of the payments for doctors' bills are paid out of general revenues. And when those doctor bills are paid, people don't have to beg for a welfare check to pay that part. We've had other parts of the program for people over 72 that were brought in the program that hadn't contributed up to an amount that would give them the full benefit. This has been general revenue. So the principle does not stand inviolate already. We have established general revenues as one of the partners in the program.
Thank you
All right,
very
Senator,
much.
let's go back to Mr. Rushford for another question or
Senator,
two.
during the Great Depression, military pensions and veterans' pensions were reduced, but civil service pensions weren't. Can you guess why?
Well, I do know that now I don't believe any contract that our government has made with the people of this country has been broken.
That's not my question, Senator. I said that military pensions and veterans' pensions were reduced by the federal government during the Great Depression, but civil service pensions weren't. Now, why?
It wasn't when I sat, I'll tell you that.
Well, I know you weren't in the Senate during the Great Depression. Well, you weren't there. I'll tell you why.
Mr. Rusher, tell us briefly because I have to dismiss Senator
It was because
Williams.
the civil service pensions were funded separately, and the first two were taken out of general revenues, which naturally then had to be reduced in time of depression.
Well, I like to think that every contract that our government enters into these days will be honored.
You'd like
Thank
to
you,
think
Senator.
that
Gentlemen, I'm sorry I have to interrupt, Senator. It's been a pleasure to have you with us in the Advocates. Thank you. Mr. Tyler?
My second witness is an honest-to-goodness retiree, Nelson Cruikshank.
Looks like a pretty lively retiree to me. Welcome to the Advocates, Mr. Cruikshank.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Tyler?
Mr. Cruikshank, you are the president of the National Council of Senior Citizens in the United States. You have some first-hand contact with them. Let me ask you this question. And I realize it's one man's opinion. Would you say that it's their general opinion that the Social Security system, by and large, is a good thing, bad thing?
I'd say it's the greatest humanitarian system that exists in any country in the world at any time in the history of mankind. It's paying out $158 million a day, including Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays every day in the year, to people who need it. And without this, there would be millions of people that would be on relief and be on public welfare and deprived of their sense of independence. It's a great system.
Does it just cover the aged, or are the others covered?
No, it covers, it protects the younger workers, and this is one of the most important parts of it. It protects people when they're in their working years from the possibility of loss of income because of disability. It gives protection to the widows and orphans where breadwinners have died. And today, out of the 28 million people that are covered by the system that are getting benefits, there are about 22% of them that are people younger than 65 years of age.
You know, we are proposing tonight that 1/3 of the costs ultimately be picked up by general revenue. Is this a brand new idea?
Oh, no, this idea was as old as the system itself. And it isn't a radical idea proposed by a few labor leaders or others, as has been suggested. In the first Social Security Advisory Committee set up under President Roosevelt in 1934, composed of businessmen, men from the academic world, men from the general public, including such men as Mr. Folsom, the secretary or the treasurer of the Eastman Kodak Company, Gerard Swope of General Electric, others, and all through the advisory councils, the one in 47, 48 that I worked on. There were bankers, insurance people, and others, and they have, through the years, recommended that the Social Security system be a tripartite, three-way, three-legged stool in terms of its financing. This is not old, and this is not new, this is not radical. It's a solid, substantial proposal coming from the most thoughtful people and the leaders in this field.
Well, it was proposed way back then, and it was proposed again, apparently, later on. Why has Congress kind of ignored the whole thing?
Well, I don't think Congress has ignored it. Congress has taken it under advisement and has given it study, but these proposals often come out way ahead of actual performance or adoption by Congress. For example, the Advisory Council of 1939 proposed that disabled be covered, and it wasn't until 17 years later that Congress adopted it. We expect the Congress, representing the broader electorate, to take a little time to catch up with the people who've specialized and made these recommendations. Now, as the previous witness indicated, the Congress has begun to move in this. They do provide general revenues in the Medicare program. There are today 422,000 people over age 72 getting $24 million a month in benefits, and they didn't contribute. This all comes out of general revenues. The people who served in the armed forces got a wage credit. This is covered under general revenues. So this is not new. It's partly in operation. Congress has begun to act.
All right, Mr. Cruikshank, let's turn to Mr. Rush, who has some questions for you now. Mr. Rush.
Cruikshank, you were formerly director of the Department of Social Security of the AFL-CIO, were you not?
I was proud to have that privilege of representing working people.
Right,
yes.
and your present organization more or less continues in that spirit by receiving money from the AFL-CIO, doesn't it?
We receive some aid from the AFL-CIO and the union people because we have a lot of union people retired. Yes.
Tell me, you told us that the original planners of Social Security had intended, really, that sooner or later general revenues would pick up a part of its cost, that there was nothing new about the idea.
That's correct.
You were familiar with their intention at the time. Did you approve of it?
Yes, I thought, I wasn't on the first advisory council, but I was there at the time, and I thought that it was a wise provision.
By 1958, however, you had apparently changed your mind when you told the House Ways and Means Committee, "We of the AFL-CIO are not here, gentlemen, asking that additional costly benefits be provided under this system and paid for out of general revenues of the government. We have consistently recommended increases in the contribution rate whenever we have recommended increased benefits that would cost more money." Quite a change.
No, there was no change.
No?
I wasn't saying that at any time and at future days in 1958, I was not saying that there would be no time in the future that the general revenues would not be needed.
And then what about the very next year, 1959, when you were a member of the Advisory Council on Social Security Financing? And the Council unanimously reported, "We believe that the experience of the last 22 years has shown the advantages of contributory social insurance over grants from general tax funds."
Well, the advantage of a contributory system is not contradictory. I was also a member of the Advisory Council in 1947 and 48 when, along with businessmen and others, we recommended the contributions out of it. So the 1959, just a minute, the 1959 Advisory Council was a very specific one set up to study the solvency of the fund and the fiscal soundness of the system. So that was a very limited advisory council.
Mr. Cruikshank, either it is true or not that the council said, "We believe the experience of the last 22 years has shown the advantages of contributory social insurance over grants from general tax funds."
But a contributory social insurance system is not contradictory. You can still have a contributory social insurance system, and this was in contrast to a system supported wholly by general revenues, and this is not what we're pressing tonight.
You are only pressing for one-third tonight.
We're only pressing for one-third.
You promise, of course, you'll never press for more, will you?
I don't know, we might.
You might, indeed you might. I'd go a little further and predict you will, Mr. Cruikshank. Tell me, is Social Security intended to provide all by itself an adequate income for a retired person?
In the early days of the planning, it was probably not intended to be a complete underwriting of people's economic need. But we have found an experience, and we have found the experience of other means of income maintenance that we have learned that this is the mainstay of people's income when they are deprived of their earned income through disability, through death, or through old age. And so we believe that it has got to become a much larger part of their income maintenance and security than was originally intended.
And if a person decides to rely on it altogether, do you feel that it should be up to the government of the United States to make sure that that particular Social Security payment is totally sufficient all by itself?
I believe that the government of the United States, or the people of the country, acting through their government and using government as an agency, should see that no one is in want.
Of course, but 7% of them are on public assistance right now. Nobody is in want. There is public assistance.
That doesn't follow. Public
Plus
assistance,
Social Security?
The public assistance, the 7% that are on public assistance doesn't mean there's only 7% of the people that need more money and more income security. These are the level that is decided by the states on a purely arbitrary basis.
Gentlemen, I gather that by public assistance we mean welfare.
Welfare funds of various types.
Here we have. I'm sorry, Mr. Rusher. We have to turn back to Mr. Tyler. Mr. Tyler, do you have another question for Mr. Cruikshank, please?
Yes, I did. A number of countries, I understand, have this tripartite system. How does it work? Successful?
Yes, and it doesn't. There are a number of countries. The main industrial countries of the free world, like West Germany and Great Britain and Japan, have government contributions into their system. It doesn't destroy the right or the dignity of the individual receiving the benefits, and it doesn't destroy the contributory principle.
All right, Mr. Cruikshank, back to Mr. Rusher now.
Mr. Cruikshank, the AFL-CIO supports national health insurance, I believe. Does your organization do so? And
yes, but we're not discussing that tonight, Mr. Rusher.
Oh, yes, we are. I'm just about to. Do you yourself support it?
Well, I support it, but we're talking about the Social Security system and national health insurance.
Mr. Rusher, you have one more question. Mr. Cruikshank, let's see if we can answer it, and that'll be it.
If the national health insurance is run as it is proposed through Social Security, how much will that add all by itself to the annual bill of Social Security costs?
It would add practically nothing as a net cost. People today are paying for their health costs. They're not getting very good health costs. And if they would decide to pay it through another mechanism, it wouldn't be any more out of their pocket if it was a good system.
That's all.
More taxes, but less others.
Mr. Cruikshank, thanks for being with us in the Advocate.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Tyler. Mr. Tyler, closing word.
Yes, there has been some discussion here about how much will be spent for what in the future. In the final analysis, the Congress of the United States will make that decision. We do believe, however, that the use of general revenue is both necessary and fair, and to summarize, for three reasons. First, it spreads the responsibility to include the rich who live on unearned income. Secondly, it can ease the tax burden on low and middle income workers. And finally, it provides the means to expand benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. For those of you at home who may have joined us late, Mr. Tyler and his witnesses have been arguing for the financing of Social Security benefits, at least in part, out of general tax revenues. Now we're going to turn to Mr. Rusher and his witnesses who oppose that proposal. Mr. Rusher?
As thus far conceived and administered, Social Security has been a plan whereby a part of every wage earner's pay is withheld and paid over to the federal government in return for the government's promise to pay certain benefits to him when he retires. In combination with ordinary savings and their other property, it has made life much easier for a great many millions of our older citizens. To their great credit, only 7% of those receiving Social Security benefits today are also on welfare. But as Congress over the years has added new benefits to to those included under Social Security, and as the cost of living has risen year by year, it has been necessary to keep on increasing the amount of money withheld from the paychecks of those still earning wages to pay for the whole system. And recently, the bite has gotten very big indeed. Last October, just before the election, everybody now receiving Social Security payments got a healthy increase. Then in January, just 2 months after the election, every American wage earner got socked for a stiff increase in the amount withheld from his wages. All right, now what? Did you think that the social planners over at the AFL-CIO, like Mr. Tyler, and their professional lobbyists, like Mr. Cruikshank, and their big labor senators, like Mr. Williams, were going to leave you alone at last? Oh, no. The expansionists, as they call themselves, have much bigger plans for you. Now they propose to put every senior citizen in America permanently on relief by piling another $30 billion a year onto the present Social Security benefits and paying for it straight out of the general revenues of the federal government. And do I need to tell you where those general revenues come from? I don't believe America's elderly either need or want the tin cup Mr. Tyler is trying to shove into their hands. To see why, let's hear first from Professor Robert Myers.
Welcome to the Advocate, Professor Myers. Nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
Professor Myers was for 23 years the chief actuary or insurance mathematician of the Social Security Administration, and he is now professor of actuarial science at Temple University in Philadelphia. Professor Myers, in your opinion, what is the chief merit of the present system of paying for Social Security by means of a payroll tax?
The chief merit of this, I believe, is that it makes the cost readily apparent to everybody, to the retired people, to the active workers who are paying these payroll taxes. And through this obvious and apparent cost, people generally can democratically decide just how much of their income they want to put into this one particular program.
And what would be the principal harm, in your opinion, of tonight's proposal to pay a third of the cost of Social Security out of general revenues?
Well, that's the other side of the coin. The cost would not be at all apparent. Many people would think that, fine, it's great to increase Social Security benefits. It won't cost me anything. It'll come out of somebody else's pocket.
The truth is what?
The truth is, of course, general revenues come out of your pocket and my pocket. And the incidence of taxation in general revenues is really not so greatly different than it is in payroll tax.
But how about the argument...
Excuse me, gentlemen, that's another way of saying that the same people that pay the payroll taxes generally pay the general revenues.
Yes, that's true. The workers of this country are primarily the people who pay all taxes.
How about the argument we have heard tonight from the expansionists to the effect that there should be further increases and some changes in Social Security benefits that will cost at least $30 billion more a year before the decade is over?
Well, in the first place, I think that $30 billion is quite an understatement when, as you bring out, their national health insurance program that they propose would be a very costly thing, and if it were put into effect, the increase in general revenue taxation would be anywhere from $50 to probably $75 billion a year. It seems to me that after the very big increases we've just had, that this is a time to think this matter over more clearly. We had a 20% increase in benefits last October, and this January, workers have had an increase in their taxes ranging from a minimum of 7.5% to a maximum of 35% over what they paid in 1972.
And what is the general philosophy of the program anyway?
Well, the general philosophy of the program, as it's been from the beginning, and it really hasn't been changed very much, is that it should be a floor of economic protection on which people can and do build through home ownership, savings, pensions, and so forth. And the proof that it's done an adequate job is the figure you quoted, that only 7% of the people have needed to go elsewhere to the government to get money in order to have a reasonable standard of living.
What about Mr. Cruikshank's argument that the people who conceived the Social Security program back in the 1930s always intended the general revenues would ultimately be needed to support it?
I don't think he's correct about that. The staff planners did suggest that there should be a one-third government contribution eventually. But President Franklin D. Roosevelt vetoed that idea and took it out of the plan when it was submitted to Congress. Moreover, in the years to come, that have come since then, Congress has repeatedly stated its intention that the program should be completely self-supporting from the taxes on payrolls for the workers who get the benefits.
All right, gentlemen. Mr. Tyler, Mr. Rusher keeps calling you an expansionist. Do you object to that, or are you going to accept?
I didn't know it was showing, so I'm just covering it.
All right.
The first point that you made was that under the present system, the cost is apparent, and under a change system, it's not going to be that visible, right?
That is correct.
Now, I hate to tangle with you on this because you're an expert in this, and my addition and subtraction isn't that good, but a few little questions, just so people who are commonsensical about it can follow our discussion. The present cost is apparent to somebody who has, let's say, an annual earning of $1,000. How much would he pay in?
This current year, somebody with an annual earnings of $1,000 would pay $58.50.
It's about 5.8%.
5.85% to be exact.
That's apparent. Now, if I make $10,000, how much do I pay in?
10 times as much.
10 times as much, but what percentage?
5.85%.
Exactly the same percentage. So it's not graduated, right?
That is correct.
Right. Now, if I make $50,000, how much do I pay in of my total income?
You would pay in $632.
What percentage is that of my total income?
It's a lower percentage.
All right. So the cost is not that apparent.
1.2%.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, if I have 100,000, I'm paying a still smaller percentage, right?
Yes, and this is just as when you go to buy a loaf of bread, you pay the same price in dollars as everybody else do, but you may, if you pay a much higher percentage of your income for it than somebody who has twice your salary. Social insurance is really a form of goods and services that people are buying.
Is that all it is? There's no problem with social conscience involved?
Well, of course, but that's the service part of it.
Well, I know it's a service point, but you're putting Social Security on the same basis as a loaf of bread or a pound of butter?
Yes.
Is it really that?
It's something that people really need.
You have been an actuary with this thing for many years. Let's talk about bread and butter now. When did the program start paying out?
It first started paying monthly benefits in 1940.
When did it start? When was it initiated?
In January 1, 1937.
Were there any people who collected benefits in 1940 and 41 and 42?
Yes.
Did they pay in enough to walk out with that pound of butter or loaf of bread?
On a social insurance approach, yes.
On a social insurance approach. In other words, they didn't pay in enough to cover what they took out of it, right?
Just as is done in private pension plans.
Well, now you made it a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread, I can't get a loaf of bread on that basis. I have to pay for it. These people didn't pay for it, did they?
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't. They just paid in 3 years and then they collected.
But the rest was paid for by the employers of the country on a pooled basis.
I know they were paid for by employees
and
and employers, and I thought it was right and you thought it was right because that was an act of social conscience, right?
That's correct.
All right, so it's somewhat different. Now, if the cost is so apparent, if I'm lucky and I inherit $1 million this year, what is the cost to me? I'm paying a tax on that. I don't have a job. What is the cost to me of Social Security?
The cost is nothing because you get no benefits from it.
Then you only pay when you get benefits.
You pay towards your benefits, not on a dollar-for-dollar basis, but by your earnings, you are insuring yourself against the risk of retirement and disability and death.
But we just finished with a case. It was a clear example of people who got benefits and did not pay for it.
They and their employers paid for it.
What I'm suggesting is that this is social insurance, and you've agreed with me. And it's different from buying a loaf of bread because there's a social conscience that goes with this kind of insurance, a sense of social responsibility. Isn't that true? That's what made the difference.
No, I think you're buying a service when you're buying social insurance.
So let me give you one other example. The doctors recently came in. When did they come in?
The doctors were covered by the program in 1965.
1965. After the doctors were in it for 1.5 years, could they collect?
If they were old enough.
If they were old enough, they could collect.
They had to be over age 72.
Well, but you say if they were old enough, they could collect, right?
That's correct.
After 1.5 years of being in the plan. Could they put in enough in 1.5 years to cover all that they're going to collect in the coming years?
Not that one particular doctor, but the doctors as a group did. In other words, the younger doctors, in a sense, were putting in something for the older doctors.
That's exactly correct, and we don't disagree with the idea of the society as a whole. But why should it always come back to the young worker paying for the scheme? Why don't we get other people in the American society who benefit from Social Security in countless ways? Why shouldn't they contribute? Don't they have a sense of social responsibility?
Shouldn't they? A brief answer, please, Professor.
The workers of this country are primarily the only ones in the country. There are very few people who have just unearned income.
All right, gentlemen, let's turn back to Mr. Rusher for one additional question. Mr. Rusher.
Professor Myers, I must say you don't look to me like a person with no social conscience. Is it true that as a result of the present system of Social Security, the rich are getting away with paying less taxes than the poor, and that this is in effect a regressive tax?
No, indeed. I think it's just the other way around. This is a very progressive system. The lower paid people get much higher benefits proportionally the higher paid do. And if you look at the system as a whole, it's a progressive system. You shouldn't just look at the tax and say it's a regressive tax.
In other words, the benefits to the poor are much larger.
Are much higher. They're heavily weighted in favor of the lower paid.
All right, back to Mr. Tyler. Professor Myers for another question.
Yes, you said that the evidence that the present plan is working is that only 7% of the retirees turn to public assistance. But isn't that due primarily to the fact that in many states, no matter how much you want from the state, they just don't put you on public assistance until you're practically dead?
No, I don't think that's so. And in some of the southern states, the public assistance programs are inadequate. But in the great northern state like Massachusetts, there's a very adequate public assistance program.
This was a national figure, wasn't it?
Yes, and I have computed that if there were adequate programs in all states, as there are in New York and Massachusetts and California, that percentage wouldn't go above 10%, which is still a mighty small figure.
Professor Myers, thanks for being with us in the Advocates.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Rusher.
Now to consider this question from the larger standpoints of public policy and politics, I call upon former United States Senator Jack Miller.
Welcome to the Advocate, Senator Miller. Nice to have you with us.
Senator Miller was United States Senator from Iowa from 1961 until this year. He was a member of the Senate Finance Committee and of the Special Senate Committee on Aging, and he was the original author of the automatic cost of living increase in Social Security benefits. Senator, we've heard tonight that tonight's proposal will help the working poor by reducing their payroll taxes, among other things. What is your opinion of this idea?
Well, it would help. But if I understood Senator Williams correctly, he did not necessarily say they were advocating cutting the Social Security taxes, they just wouldn't increase them. But either way is only going to temporize with the problem of the so-called working poor. The problem essentially is one of welfare. And of all the welfare proposals, welfare reform proposals that were considered last year and the year before in the Congress, including the one reported out by the Senate Finance Committee, I don't recall a single one that didn't want to help the working poor by supplementing their earnings by payments out of the general fund of the Treasury as a welfare approach. And I don't recall any of them trying to link this in to Social Security, which, as you know, is essentially an annuity-type social insurance program.
Suppose we do pass, though, a bill to finance Social Security to the tune of a third through general revenues. What do you foresee as the likely political consequences of such a change, sir?
Well, first of all, this has already been brought out, I think, in previous testimony. The restraining impact of the people paying the bill through their payroll taxes and seeing how much those payroll taxes are would be detracted from, especially if 1/3 was used from general fund. There would be a temptation to go from 1/3 to a half to 2/3. There are members of Congress who've been talking about putting it all under the general fund of the Treasury. Now, either of two events could happen. This would lead to a lack of restraint, increasing benefits, and the way the Congress has been operating in recent years, more deficits and more inflation. And of course, they'd live up to the contract by paying off in inflated dollars. That's not a very pretty picture. Alternatively, it could lead to a demand, public pressure, especially from the younger members of the workforce who are paying so much of this as they come into their political power, to cut down on benefits or perhaps to go to a need factor in determining benefits.
A need factor?
A need factor, so that those who don't need them wouldn't get them, and those who need them might get more, which is something that has been pretty well out of the social insurance concept from the beginning. And then finally, this 1/3 or 1/2, whatever it amounts to out of the general fund of the Treasury, would be bidding for general fund dollars against other essential programs such as air and water pollution control, mass transit programs, health and education programs.
Senator, what is the real problem here, and what is the solution to it?
Well, the real problem, I think, is that a majority of the members of Congress have been looking too much towards the objects or the beneficiaries of increases in Social Security benefits, and not enough to those who are paying the bill. And now, especially after what happened last year, the day of reckoning is here. And the bite is really tight this year. And so there's pressure being built up to try to do something about it. That is where the problem really originated.
All right, Senator, let's turn to Mr. Tyler. Mr. Tyler, some questions for Senator Miller, please.
Senator Miller, if I understand correctly, you are suggesting that the people under Social Security who at the present time are having considerable hardship, that sector of it, should not be protected by an expanded Social Security program. You're suggesting that they go on welfare.
I'm not suggesting that they receive additional Social Security benefits which they're not paying for. I'm suggesting that the working poor, supplementing their payments, their work payments, is an essential feature of any welfare reform program that's worthy of the name. Because if you don't do it, then you discourage them from working and encourage them to revert to a welfare status.
I'm not sure I understand it, so let me be specific. At the present time, there are about 5 million people who are getting Social Security who, in effect, are living below the poverty level in the United States. That's about 1 out of every 4 of the elderly citizens under Social Security. What do you propose we do with them?
Well, now that's another aspect of welfare reform. In response to the original question, we were talking about those who are paying Social Security taxes.
They're paying Social Security taxes.
You're talking about the working poor when you do that. But you're now talking about those who are drawing Social Security, which means they're no longer working, they're retired. Such people
Senator,
as the
let's clarify, because I'm not sure I understand it, Mr. Tyler. Are you saying that 1 out of every 4 elderly persons on Social Security are below the poverty line?
That's correct.
It's that group, I gather, Senator, that Mr. Tyler is talking about.
Yes,
that's
well,
correct.
I don't know, but...
Not the working poor.
We'll take that, no, because the working poor are not retired.
Precisely.
He's talking about the retired people, such as the aged, the blind, the disabled, people of that kind, and many of whom are drawing Social Security benefits, which are inadequate.
Right.
And here again, welfare reform demands that they receive supplemental benefits and out of the general fund of the Treasury in order for them to maintain a decent standard of living. But I don't recall in the various welfare reform proposals that we considered in the Finance Committee, including the one reported over by the House, of any serious proposal to tie this into Social Security.
Well, we have several proposals. One would be actually to remove some of the burdens that they bear at the present time to operate within the Social Security system, and Senator Williams did present them here this evening.
Well, I think...
And we would up the benefits in general.
I think, Mr. Tyler, that what you're talking about here is you're talking about Social Security supplements as against welfare reform. And welfare reform has had a tremendous amount of attention in this country. And I dare say that it will be a very big order of business in the current session of Congress. If you had welfare reform such as was passed by the House of Representatives as modified by the Senate Finance Committee last year, I don't think we'd have this program tonight. Because your working poor would be brought up to a decent standard of living out of the general fund of the Treasury.
In welfare reform, where would the money come from?
Out of the general fund of the Treasury.
Out of the general Treasury. You did hear Mr. Russia say earlier that he did not want us having these senior citizens running around with a tin cup, didn't you?
Well, I don't know what that means, for example, but let me
say this. What it means is they don't want them getting money out through welfare.
Well, now let's make this clear. If you don't do it this way, if you don't do it out of the general fund of the Treasury, you're not going to have to worry about a need factor. But if you do it out of the general fund of the Treasury, you're going to get into a need factor, and I don't need to tell you, Mr. Tyler, that a need factor in Social Security has been abhorrent to your people. Very abhorrent.
That's right.
But the best guarantee of getting the need factor cranked into this, to depart from the concept of the annuity social insurance approach, is to start paying these out of the general fund of the Treasury on a welfare concept, and there's where your need factor comes in, because you cannot justify payments under that concept unless it is out of the, unless it's on a need
Gentlemen,
basis.
we can't hear you. Let's Senator Miller finish. Did you finish your
Yes,
answer?
let me repeat. You cannot justify those payments out of the general fund of the Treasury if there is no need.
Yeah, but wouldn't you agree with me, Senator Miller, that the best way to deal with the need factor for the elderly citizen is to pay him adequate Social Security so that he is not in need?
A brief answer, please, Senator.
That depends upon the income status of the recipient. You certainly could not justify that to high-income individuals, so there again, you're on a need basis in determining who's going to get those increased benefits.
Senator, let's go back to Mr. Rusher for one additional question.
Senator, in your opinion, do the recipients of Social Security in this country in general want to be treated as an aspect of the welfare problem by having their payments made out of the general revenues?
I don't believe that most of them do, Mr. Rusher. After all, they have been used to the concept of social insurance on an annuity basis. The very concept of Social Security, payments coming out of a separate identifiable trust fund, gives them the feeling of Social Security. Do away with that, put them at the whims of the annual appropriations of Congress? I don't think they want.
All right, back to Mr. Tyler. Mr. Tyler?
Yes, just one question. You suggest that if there are funds out of general revenues, there would be no restraint. But since we are continuing with the contributory feature to provide two-thirds of the funds, is that not a built-in restraint?
I think that's a fair point, Mr. Tyler, but not as much. And I was attempting to get across the point that there would not be as much restraint, not the fact that there would be none. But we need plenty of restraint. That's part of the trouble that we're in today. There hasn't been enough restraint. And as I pointed out, you've had a majority of the Congress focusing attention on the beneficiaries and overlooking those who are paying the bill. And that's what's led to the problem, which is, I suppose, had a lot to do with the program we're on this evening.
Senator, thanks very much for being with us in the Advocate. Mr. Rusher?
It is an interesting philosophical point that the other side makes. Senator Williams made it most clearly. To accept welfare payments out of the general revenues when you really need them is undignified. The way to solve the problem is to run the whole business through Social Security, and thereby it becomes dignified. Because if Social Security is paid out of the general welfare, everybody still thinks of it as basically Social Security and not welfare. This is simply a semantic trick in order to make people who need help feel dignified. We are making the entire recipients of Social Security in America part of the welfare system.
Thank you, Mr. Rusher. That completes our cases, and now it's time for your summary.
Tonight's proposal calls for a fundamental change in the whole philosophy of our Social Security system. No longer will it be a plan to help America's senior citizens to plan for and pay for a dignified retirement. Instead, everybody who has retired from the workforce is to be treated as a chronic welfare case pensioned out of the ever-growing taxes of those who still are working for their living. I don't think it's fair, and I most certainly don't think it's necessary. Just permit people to save some of their money while they're earning it, instead of taxing every nickel of it out of their hides, and then on top of that, be sure that they receive the fair value of what the government withheld and promised to pay, and they will not need or want Mr. Tyler's sweet charity. Like every magician, he calls your attention to what is going on up here, but the trick is really being played down here. Don't be fooled. Vote no.
All right, Mr. Tyler, your summary, please.
In many ways, this has been a complex discussion, yet as in many complex matters, behind the confusion there very often is a very simple question. Shall the costs of Social Security fall on the shoulders of the working stiff, or should we reach into general funds, mainly financed by a graduated income tax, so that the well-to-do who live off unearned income also contribute to a system that is one of the great strengths of America? We think that the man who works should pay his share so he knows that the benefits are a matter of right. We also believe that those who live on unearned income, like inheritance and dividends, should pick up a piece of the cost because it is their social responsibility. Vote yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. We've now reached that point in the program where we ask you, our audience, to participate, and it's a very important form of participation. What do you think about tonight's question? Should Social Security benefits be financed in part from general tax revenues? Send us your vote on a letter or postcard and mail it to the Advocates, Box 1973, Boston 02134. The question is an important one. The Senate Special Committee on Aging is in the process of conducting hearings on this and related Social Security questions. So make your views known and write the Advocates. We will tabulate them and send them to all of the members of Congress and to others in the government concerned with this issue. Remember that address, the Advocates, Box 1973, Boston 02134. At the end of December, the Advocates journeyed to Yosemite National Park to debate an important question on future policy for our national park system. And the question was, should your use of our national parks be drastically restricted? Of the almost 5,000 letters we received on that question, 75% said yes, use should be restricted, and 25% said no, our use of our national parks should not be drastically restricted. And now, let's take a look at next week's program.
If something called the National Court of Appeals is approved by Congress, you may never have a chance to take your case to the Supreme Court. Under this new proposal, 90% of everything the High Court sees now will be screened out. Now, since it's your constitutional rights we're talking about changing, maybe you'd like to hear the debate. Should we create a National Court of Appeals to ease the burden of the Supreme Court? A question next time for the Advocates.
If you would like to receive a copy, a complete transcript of tonight's broadcast, you may do so by sending us a check or a money order for $2 to the Advocates, that same address, Box 1973, Boston 02134. You should get your copy within 10 days after we receive your request. Don't forget to specify the program whose transcript you want, and don't forget that $2 for our costs, and of course include a return address. And now, with thanks to our Advocates and to their very able witnesses, we conclude tonight's debate.
The Advocates as a program takes no position on the issues debated tonight. Our job is to help you understand both sides more clearly. This program was recorded.